Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Today we will be talking about conditionals and how we can use them to alter the flow of the program. In our last video, we talked about the ternary operator, which allows us to have a condition, and then what happens if that condition is true, and what happens if the condition is false. So in one line, we can alter the direction of the program, and out here we print the %d, and the %d comes from this or this, and it depends on our condition. So in this case, items is 3, and we want to see if that was less than 10. That is true. So we will print out 10 minus items, and that's our %d, and we get 7 at the bottom. If we want to have more complicated decision making, then we have to use something called an if statement. An if statement, let's redo the problem we just saw. Int items equals 3. So an if statement would say if, and then we have a parentheses. What goes inside the parentheses is our condition. So we wanted to see if items less than 10. And then we put an open curly brace, and then the closing curly brace is automatically placed. And inside the if curly braces, we'll do system.out.printf, and we can do our %d/n. And then if it's less than 10, we want to print 10 minus items. And if it's not that, we can do else. And with an else, there are no parentheses. It's just an open and a closed curly brace. The close is automatically added when you type the open. Else system.out.printf %d/n, and we want to print out items minus 10. If we run this, we'll see 3 is less than 10, items is 3, and 3 is less than 10, so it'll print this part out. How an if statement works is it checks if this condition is true, then it will do whatever is in the curly braces. And then when it sees the else part, well, if this statement was true, then it won't go into the else part. So all we should see is this section and nothing else. Let's run it. And we see 7, just like we did before. Notice that it doesn't print this part, because this is what happens if the else part is what would happen if the if part didn't happen. So if we put 13 here instead of 3, then it would check if this part is true. Well, it's not true, it's false. So it will skip this part and go into the else part. So then the else part will print this. And if we run it, we will see 3, which is 13 minus 10. 13 minus 10 is 3. So this is how we can control where our program goes. If this statement is true, do everything inside these curly braces. If this statement is false, do everything inside these curly braces. Now we can also combine conditions. Let's say we have int items is 13, and we have double price equals $4.99. If we have int items equals 13 and double price equals $4.99, we can say if items is less than 10, then we want this. We can also have other conditions. Maybe we don't want fewer than 10 items. Maybe we want more than 10 items, but we want our price to be low as well. So what we can do is else if, and then we can have another condition. And else if gives us another condition, like else if items greater than equal to 10, and we want price to be less than 8, then we will system.out.printf. Well, let's say we want to print out the price, and we will print out price. but we only want to print out %.2. We want to round the price to 2 decimal places. So what does the else if do? Well, if items is less than 10, this part's false. So then it'll go into the else if part. Then it'll check the else if. It'll check the part in parentheses. Else if items is greater than or equal to 10, well, this first part is true, and price is less than 8. And that's also true because price is $4.99. It'll do everything in this set of parentheses, and once it's done printing out the price, it will skip this part. So this first if was skipped because the condition was false. Then it checks this condition first, false, so we skip the if part. Then we check the second condition, and this is a double condition. We have two conditions joined together with an and, so they both must be true. So it checks this, and since it's true, it'll do everything in here. And the else part will get skipped because this was true. So if we run this, we should see $4.99. That's the price, which is expected because we wanted to print out the price in 2 decimal places. This controls our program by saying we can either take this direction, or we can take this direction, or we can take this direction. We cannot do something in here and in here. We can only pick one place to go. Suppose that we change the items to less than 20. If items is less than 20, what do you think will happen? Well, if this is true, then it'll go in here, and items is 13 right now. So if items is 13, 13 is less than 20, then we should see it print out 10 minus 20, which would be negative 10. Would it check this next condition? No, it wouldn't, because what an if statement does is the first true statement it finds, it will go into those set of curly braces and skip everything else. Once it meets a true statement in the parentheses, it skips everything else. It will not print this part out, and it will not print this part out either. So if we run this, we should just see negative 3, because 10 minus 13 is negative 3. So once a statement is true, it skips everything else. So this is called an if else block. This is considered one block, meaning that it will check this, and if this part is true, then we skip the else if and we skip the else. If statements come in these blocks, but it is not required, you can just have one if statement by itself, and you can remove this else, and then it becomes like you have 2 if statements. Now we'll check if items is less than 20, well then it's true, it'll print this out. We don't have an else or an else if block here, but we start another if block. When you start another if block, it will start checking again. It won't ignore any conditions. It only ignores conditions if it is an else if and else block. When you start a new if, it starts rechecking. So first it'll check if items is less than 20. That's true. So then it'll print out the number of items. Then it starts a new if block, and it goes like, okay, I need to start checking again. So it'll start checking, is items greater than or equal to 10? Yes, it is. And the price is less than 8.0? Yes, it is. So then it'll go in here. And then it will skip the else part because the if block is part of the else block as well. So if we print this out, we should see the negative 3, and we should see $4.99 as the price. So if we save this and run it, we will see the negative 3 from the 10 minus items, and we will see the $4.99 from the price here, rounded to 2 decimal places, and that was from up here. So this is how you can have checks in place where you want to check multiple things. Like you want to check this, then print this out. You want to check this, then print this out. So this is how you can have even finer control. And otherwise, if this part is false, then print this. So what is required in an if statement? Well, the minimum that is required is just an if. I can place a comment over here, so it will ignore all of this. So if we ignore all of this and we just have an if by itself, if items is less than 20, that is true, then print out 10 minus items, which will be -3. If we run this, and if by itself, it'll just show -3. This is the minimum that is required for an if statement, and you can have if, else if, and else in one block. You can also have if and else like we had in the beginning. So this is how we can control which direction our program goes. And it's not just one line, we can have multiple lines inside these blocks. Let me change this back to an else if. So maybe we want to do the price and then we'll print out system.out.printf. Maybe we want to print out we are in the first block. And maybe we'll put that over here, except in this part we will put second instead of first. We are in the second block. And over here we will copy paste that and put we are in the third block. So if we go back to the else if part, we have if items is less than 20, which is true, we'll print out 10 minus items and we are in the first block. And you will see that because this is an else if and an else, both of these sections will be skipped. And we can see that when we run it. -3, we are in the first block. So only these two got printed out. If we change this else if back to an if and we run it again, we should see this part is true, so these will print out. This part is true, so these will also print out. But since this if is connected to the else block will be skipped. So let's run it and we should see these 4 printed out. And if we scroll up, we'll see -3, we are in the first block, 499, we are in the second block. So that's what happens if you put an if. And if we want to reach the else block, we can change this back to a 10, and we can change this to a less than. So I'm trying to force the program into the else block. How this is going to happen is if items is less than 10, well, items is 13, so this is going to be false. So it'll skip this first if section. Now it starts a new if section, and so it starts rechecking. So items is less than 10. This is false. In an AND statement, if the first part is false, it knows that the whole thing is going to be false, because it doesn't matter. False and true is a false statement, and false is a false statement. So if it checks the first statement and it shows that it's false, it will not check the second statement because it already knows that the result of this is false. So then it knows that this is false. So then it skips this part and goes directly into the else block. Else it'll print out items -10 and we are in the third block. If we run that, we should see 3, we are in the third block because 13 minus 10 is 3. So an else block is when all other conditions fail. And if we put an else if over here, then this just makes it items is less than 10, that's false. Then if it's false, it'll skip this part and then it'll see is this next thing true, because it's part of the same if block. So we have if this is false, then it'll check the else if part, else if, and then, well, the first part we already checked back here, which was false. So this is false. So this whole thing is false, and then it'll skip this whole part, and then it'll print out the last. So we'll run that, and we will see 3, we are in the third block. So this is how if statements work. Now there is another way we can control where our program goes, which is called a switch case. A switch case is where we have a variable that we are switching, and we have many cases for it. The best way to show an example is if we have grades. If we say int grade, or let's say char grade equals, let's say we get a B in a class. So if we have a switch case, what it looks like is we want to switch, and then in parentheses we put the thing we want to switch. We switch the grade. So we switch the grade, and then we have different cases. We have case, and then we put the grade that must match, and then we put a colon. So if our grade is equivalent to A, the character, then we can print, or we can do system.out.printf. Your grade is between 90 and 100. Then we have to put a break, and I'll get to why we need to put the break. So this is if our grade is A, and then for a different grade, we can put case B, and then we can do the same thing here, just copy paste this over, but except over here we need to change it to between 80 and 90. And then same thing we can do for case C. And then instead of, we can put 70 and 80, and then we can do case D between 60 and 70, and then we can have case F system.out.printf your grade is below 60. And then we need our last break. So if we run this, what the program will do is say, okay, char grade is B. I want to switch grade, which means I want to see what the grade is. And we have different cases to switch. So is it A? No. Then go to the next place where it says case. Is it B? Yes. So then when it's B, I want to do this. I want to print that out, and then I break. Break means I want to get out of this curly brace section. I want to get out of the curly brace section. So that's why we have a break in between each one. Break means get out of the curly brace section. So each one of these has a break. So let's run this, and we should see your grade is between 80 and 90, which is what it shows. Your grade is between 80 and 90, and then break. So what if we didn't put this break here and it was still B? Well, then what happens is it'll say grade equals B. We want to switch the grade. A? No, it's not A. Let's go to the next case. B? Yes, it is B. So print F. So it'll print that out, but there's no break. It goes into case C. So if there's no break, then keep going. I'll print out this next part too, because there was no break. And now I've reached the break, and now I will exit. So if we run this, we should see the one for B printed out, and we should see the one for C printed out. Let's run this. Your grade is between 80 and 90. Your grade is between 70 and 80. So that's what happens if you forget the break. So let's put that back in there. And now it should work properly. Your grade is between 80 and 90. So notice how this would take many if-else if statements. If we wrote this as an else if, we would have to say if grade equals A, and then if grade equals B, and then if grade equals C, D, F. And we would actually have to do an else if grade equals A, else if grade equals B, else if grade equals C, else if grade equals D, else if grade equals F. And then we'd have to put these printf statements in each of those sections. But what if we accidentally put a grade that does not exist, like T? If char grade equals T, then what? Well, there's a special case we can put. We can put default. Default is the default case. If none of the other cases match, then go to the default. And system.out.printf. We can say, this is not a grade. And then we can have our break at the end. So this is not a grade, because a T is not a grade. And if we run this, we should see printed out to the screen, this is not a grade. So a default is kind of like the else block. When none of the other cases match, then go to the default, which is the else and the else if. So these are two ways we can control programs. Switch case is easy. easier to write out if you're comparing one value and there are multiple possible values it could have, like A, B, C, like in terms of grades, like A, B, C, D, F, or if you accidentally put something else, then there's a default, which is kind of like the else case. So we have the if and the else if and the else, and then we have the switch case where we can have multiple cases that are switched, and then we have the default, which is like the else. So if we were to write this as an if else, it would be if grade, or if, and then you have your parenthesis, grade equals A, and then you'd have something in there, and then else if grade equals B, and you would have something in here, and then you'd have else if grade equals C, then you'd have something in here, else if grade equals D, and you'd have something in here, else if grade equals F, then you'd have something in here, and then you'd have your else block. Now in all of these blocks, you would only have system.out.print f, your grade is between 90 and 100. And you don't need a break in here, because what controls the place where it stops are the curly braces. You don't need a break in the if. So then this one would be 80 and 90. And then this would be 70 and 80. And then this would be 60 and 70. And then this one would be your grade is below 60. Below 60. Otherwise, else this is not a grade. It even recommends me to replace the chain of ifs with a switch case, but the ifs will work as well. Similarly, T, we get this is not a grade. If we change T to C, then we'll see that it is between 70 and 80, and we get that as well. But notice how we only have one line in each of these. Java lets us do a shortcut where we don't need the curly braces if it's only one line of code. So we can delete all the curly braces here. So if you only need to do one line of code after your check, then you don't need the curly braces. You can just say if grade equals A, then system.out.printf, your grade is between 90 and 100. If we run this, and we'll still see that your grade is between 70 and 80. Grade is C, then it will say grade is A, no. Else if grade is B, no. Else if grade is C, yes. Then print this out. But one thing that is harder to do is suppose you forget the break in a switch case, then like if I missed my break after the check for B, then it would also print out the C part, and then it would break because after the C part is where the break was. In an if else block, it's not possible to do that, where it will bleed over into the next condition, because what it does is it checks this condition. Is it true? Then it runs the part. In this case, it's only one line. We don't have the curly braces. If it did have the curly braces, then it would go from the beginning to the end of the curly braces. But then once it completes its section, then it exits. There's no way to go into this next section, because once it does that one thing, then it's done. So this is the basics of if else if, else, and switch cases. In the next video, we will have more practice with this with more complex conditions, and we will also try to mix up the switch case and the if else.